Having heard that quite short clip, are there any comments or questions about what Lorna talked about, or things you'd like to know about the school at the moment?
Just to say, I was just very pleased to hear what Lorna said, and the key things that stuck out for me was the fact that girls' education is a long-term benefit to society as a whole, and the girls will be an asset not just for Western Equatoria, but for the whole country and hopefully also internationally one day. So, and she emphasizes that commitment is key, and progress comes through that commitment. And with that, I pass back on to you and the audience for any questions to do with the school, the girls' education.
How many of the original cohort are in the top secondary form that you've got at the moment?
Is David who would be the right person to answer that?
David or Julia, maybe. I don't know. David, start.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we have, I think, 60 or so in the senior school now, after the challenges we had with COVID. I think Julia will have the exact numbers, but that's my recollection of roughly how many we've got there.
And how many year groups is that?
I think that's 3 at the moment.
Yeah.
I would just like to ask how South Sudan in general and the school in particular have been affected by COVID this last year.
David?
Well, I have a stab at that, and then Jean or anyone else who's got an insight might be able to help. So South Sudan, I think, has been affected in the same way as many countries in Africa. There's very low vaccination rates. I think across Africa as a whole, it's around 2%. And that's of people who've been double vaccinated. And so there's been a considerable amount of challenge in South Sudan. There have been a somewhat uncoordinated response to the pandemic, and it's also very difficult to understand the degree of impact there's been, because record keeping and statistic gathering is not the same as it is in the UK. So what we do know is that it's been significant, but it's hard to know what the impact has been because of a number of factors. And I suppose I'd highlight 1 or 2. Firstly, it's a more outdoor community and of course a warmer community, so that has an impact on the spread of the virus, and of course, as with many African nations, it's also a younger community. There are fewer older people and therefore fewer vulnerable people. However, there's very little good hospital facilities around, and often people don't find their way to hospital. So it's a really mixed picture, and what we know is that few people have been vaccinated. It's had a big impact on the community, but it's really hard to be able to assess that in any detail because of all the factors I've just outlined.
I can see Margaret would like to come in, and she's just back, hot from South Sudan. So
fantastic. Well, go ahead, Margaret.
Just to add to what David was saying, the schools were closed in March of 2020. All schools, all learning institutions were closed, and they did not reopen till about April 2021. So it's over a year where everybody was out of school, and that will have a huge impact. And I imagine that's what's contributed to the numbers in the secondary at Ibba. It seems to me that 60 is only half of what should be there. You know, we should have 120, but that COVID is undoubtedly going to impact, absolutely. But also what David was saying about the outdoors, I think that's probably been one of the saving graces, that people live outside, live sort of in the fresh air so much. So COVID possibly hasn't spread as much because of that. But on the other hand, because there's very little testing, who would know how many cases there actually have been? So, you know, I don't think there's any accurate information on the COVID situation there. Thank you.
I can just come in on the numbers of girls in the school. When the girls returned after schools opened in April of this year, 188 girls were in the school and 50 girls had not returned. So that is the figure. Some of those girls had gone on to other schools more locally to their homes. And some have unfortunately either got married or become pregnant, but you have to remember that these girls are 18, 19, 20, some of them. And so this is not surprising. It was predicted that these would be the sort of figures of girls who would have dropped out of school. But since we had those figures, I know further girls have been recruited. So I haven't actually got the exact figures currently in the school, but that was the position at the start of the term.
Thanks, Julia. And Julia, am I right in remembering that it's around about 120 in primary and 60 plus in secondary?
Yes, something like that. Yes, I haven't got the exact figures in front of me for those numbers. Yeah.
I can see that Kathy Williams would like to come in.
It was just to say that there's an article on the BBC News website in the last 24 hours talking about COVID in South Sudan. And they say that only 0.3% of the population have had both vaccinations. And the issue is distributing the vaccines. So tiny proportion of the population are being reached. You can just look it up on the BBC News website if it's of interest.
I think that must have been the talk that I heard, or in print, the talk that I heard on Radio 4, just a brief talk about vaccination in the Sudan, and it said about 1 in 500 had been vaccinated, and those were mainly in Juba or near Juba, and of course the rural areas are hardly getting any vaccination at all. So it is tough.
Okay, wonderful. I would like to introduce our next speaker in virtuality. So Honorable Grace Apollo Musa, who is the new Minister of Education for Western Equatoria State. She's a former MP and a women's advocate. She's also a mother of 3 girls and hails from Western Equatoria. We attempted this week to have an interview with her. We tried to piece together what we could because of the connection. Well, I hope you bear with us and take that in. But the whole concept was to talk about the girls' education for the long haul and understand from the minister what her journey was to get to the point she is now professionally, and also to give us an insight into challenges that she's facing and her vision for schools and education in Western Equatoria.